Welcome to That Entrepreneur Life, a podcast about entrepreneurship that takes you from idea to launch and beyond. Each week, your hosts, Andrew Lees and Clint McPherson, discuss different business topics aimed at adding value to any entrepreneur's journey.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of That Entrepreneur Life. I'm Andrew Lees, and I'm usually joined by my co-host, Clint McPherson. He's not going to be here today, so it will just be myself. But I am very excited to have Jennifer Thornton on the show today. Jennifer, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How about you?
Awesome. Yeah, I'm doing great too. Yeah, it's really great to have you on the show today. Before we get into our questions, our discussion, can you just give us our audience a quick overview of who you are and what you're all about?
So I am the founder and CEO of 304 Coaching, and I launched that business a few years ago after a long corporate career. And today we help organizations create talent strategies that match their business strategies so that the people that are on the team can make all of your dreams come true, that all that stuff in that business strategy.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's so important to have a good team. And as a business, we're all trying to leverage. You can only go so far by yourself, right? So at some point you have to leverage other people's time and resource and, their expertise in certain things. So, and it's obviously very, very important to get the right people, not just get anybody for any job. It just doesn't work like that, especially for certain tasks. So, I love that. So Jennifer, as you're a sought after business strategist and CEO of 304 Coaching, can you take us back to when your entrepreneurial journey began, and what is it about entrepreneurship that excites you?
So I think it began really early in my career. I grew up in the retail industry, and I ran stores out of college, and when you're running a store, you're running a multi-million-dollar business. And, very young in my career, I made hiring decisions. I made decisions on where to deploy people and why. I woke up to my KPIs every single morning. And I knew that I had to make really great decisions if I wanted my store, my unit to be successful. And it became a lot of fun to think about, who to put on certain shifts or different things that were going on in the business, and think about who to put there to get the most out of it. And, leading those stores early on helped me kind of, learn what it would be like to manage something without supervision. As I said, that's what entrepreneurship is.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. We have lots of bosses. I think people think they go into entrepreneurship to not have a boss, but all of our clients are bosses.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. You have to keep all of our bosses happy. But I think what excites me about it is the creativity. I get to wake up every day and break what works, and no one can tell me no. And I love breaking what works, and I love trying to figure it out and put it back together, and how could it be done, and how do you create a better wheel? And I think that's one of the things that excites me the most about it.
That's very cool. Yeah. And that's a good outlook to have, is to break things, right? You take them, to a certain point, and then you break them and figure out, how can I make this better? So it's not just status quo. You're not just like when you were waking up to your KPIs every morning. It would be very easy to say, yeah, this is what it is. This is how, this is how the business operates. This is our data, but not doing anything with that data just kind of keeps you stuck in the same place and doesn't help you progress. So I think that's very important and pretty interesting to figure out who, like you were talking about, putting certain people on certain shifts and, juggling them around. How did that work? What were you seeing in different people that allowed them to take on different responsibilities and move the business forward based on their, expertise?
Early on, early in my career, I was, in those stores. But I think what I learned over time and, as my career progressed and my experience progressed, I did all kinds of different types of jobs inside of an organization. And my last job there, or my last corporate job, I was there probably in 5-6 years, and I managed an international HR division. And so we had the challenges of language, culture, time zones, just your regular old, issues you have with a team, plus everything else on top of it. So what I think I found, when I was leading an international team, is that you had to find some common ground with people, and you had to kind of find a language and a culture inside of your group. And so that was, somewhat challenging because we actually spoke different languges, but we all shared business English, I guess, that we looked at it, but everyone learns business English different too, which is a whole nother story and how to communicate in that arena. But I think what I've learned is you have to really get excited about what people do right naturally and let them do that. And what they are not naturally great at, even if it's something they have to do, how do you get them to a passing grade? And then everything else they're incredible at, get them even better at it. And I think those are some of the things I learned, as I grew in my career, and the things I teach today, and how I help companies today look at talent.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What if somebody has they're interested in something, like they're very good naturally at one thing, but they really would like to branch out, and they really like to be able to do something different, but maybe they're not quite as good at it yet. Do you kind of keep them doing what they're doing really well? Or do you encourage them to branch out and encourage them to learn more and do something out of their comfort zone that you might be taking a gamble on the fact that they're ever going to be that good at it, but it's just what they want to do? How would you deal with something like that?
I think that if there's someone on your team that's a great A player and they're doing a fantastic job and they want to try some new things, there's nothing to lose. Let them try, because you don't know what you think they may be great at. They might actually not be great at. You just thought that was the best. They may be even better at something else. And, when we allow our teams and team members to do new things, try new tools or tasks or jobs or experiences, what we're doing is we're expanding their mind map. We're expanding what they see as their truth and their reality, because your mind only knows what it's seen. And so as we give new experiences to our team, we're expanding their views. We're expanding how they see things. So if they're adding on maybe some experiences to see how they do, they now see their current job even different, and more than likely see it in a new way that will help your business. So anytime you can provide experiences for your team that they are excited about, do it. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think that's important to encourage people to do what they really want to do. And then everybody might decide that that's not, that wasn't a good direction. Or like you said, I think that's great too, that you might have thought that they might have been really good at something, but even better at something else. You just really have to let them explore and find out what they're really good at. And that ultimately leads to growth for personally for that employee, and then as a whole for the company.
Yeah, it's interesting when you allow people to grow and you provide them avenues to grow, they'll naturally grow in other ways too. And you create this culture of trying new things. And it's okay. It's okay to say, hey, I don't know how to do this, but I'll try to figure it out. And you think about innovation that we need in today's world. That's how it's created. People come to me all the time and they're like, my team doesn't innovate. My team doesn't make their own decisions. My team doesn't do this and do that. And I'm like, well, let's talk about your actions and how you're actually holding your team back through how you lead. And you're not getting what you want because you're not leading in a way that fosters and grows that. So providing experiences and allowing people to grow is just a fantastic way to stretch your business.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So with 304 coaching, you focus on helping companies find that perfect fit for any position and fill talent gaps. How does your team help identify talent to make sure that they're the right hire, both in the short term and the long term? So not that it basically, in other words, that it doesn't just look good on paper, that, but that that person is going to stick around for a while and help the company grow.
Yeah. So one of the things that happens when we hire people, there's a lot of things that go through our head. Sometimes it's just, call recruiting and get me a body. And sometimes it is,
Mm-hmm.
I want a person to do job A, but we really haven't done the work to decide why is this job important? What are the impacts of this job? Who will this job be working with? And so those are some of the skills that we teach people, like how to really decide who to hire and why.
Mm-hmm.
Then on top of that, we use OAD, Organizational Analyst in Design, and it's a pre-employment assessment that helps us recognize traits. And so we can interview people on skills and experience, but we can't interview people on traits.
Mm-hmm.
An example of that would be their level of assertiveness. No one really can walk in and say, well, I'm super assertive, or, I'm not assertive at all. And I know you want me to be in a position of high influence, and I'm not assertive, so I'm not going to be able to do that. No one's going to tell you that. Most people don't even know that about themselves. And so we have a tool that helps organizations not only get the right culture, we can interview to culture, we can interview to experience, we can interview to, education, knowledge, but the trait tool, OAD, helps us get the right traits to the job. And we usually terminate people, or people fail because of how the work gets done, not because they don't know how to do the work.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where matching traits makes such a difference and gets the right people in the right places. So then you can start to develop and train them.
That's interesting. Yeah. And we're not necessarily going to understand how to communicate our traits as much as we're able to, fill out a survey, based on, with just like the things that we know how to do, but our traits and the way in which we do things is maybe not as obvious to us unless it's like pulled out of us, I guess. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that can, I think, that can lead to finding somebody who is a great candidate for, you find somebody who's really great, but maybe not great for a particular company. You might find somebody who's awesome on paper to do the job that you need them to do, except that they might not jive with the company culture. And then that does everybody a disservice because they're going to be resentful of that and you're going to be resentful. It's not going to be a match. So they could be perfect somewhere else. And that helps, I guess, really close that gap and find a better candidate.
Yeah, it does. And one of the things it measures is your level of adaptability and your level of creativity when you're making decisions. Not like creativity of I'm a good painter or something like that. It's when I'm making decisions, do I like to break what works or do I like to go with conventional thinking? And so you could hire 3 companies could be looking for the same marketing analyst. But if a company is very traditional and doesn't necessarily want to change, they want someone to come in and, just keep things going. If you hire someone highly adaptable and highly creative, they're going to feel boxed in. They're going to be frustrated because you don't want to hear their ideas or they can't, do things differently.
Right.
And conversely, if you have a company and you want someone to come in and shake it up and break everything, but you hire someone who's very conventional, then they're not coming up with the ideas that you expect them to have. Both candidates may be fantastic, but their traits and the way they do their job has to match for them to be successful.
Yeah, I agree. I've definitely seen that where, and neither way is right. You have companies, you have positions that really require, like not every position has to be this amazing out of the box thinking type thing. I mean, businesses have there's certain roles that need to be carried out that are just, it is what it is. It's getting from point A to point B and it's a straight line. And like straight line's the most efficient way and it just needs to get done. And so, like you said, having somebody who's more conventional, some people, they're just geared towards that kind of thing. They like to they don't want to be thinking outside the box. So they don't want to have too much responsibility or be thinking creatively. So that's perfect for them. But somebody, like you said, somebody who is more creative would feel trapped by that. And then that straight line A to B person would feel overwhelmed with being in, a position where oh man, I have to I have to do what? I have to, come up with my own ideas, and I have to think creatively, and I have to do all this stuff on my own. As entrepreneurs, we're more of the creative, out of the box thinking. How do we, solve these problems? Yeah, that's very interesting. And it's important to get that right. And so as an entrepreneur, I wanted to ask you what, and this might be a little bit of a loaded question, because especially as you just answered the last one, there's definitely different characteristics that different positions, different companies are looking for. And there's so many factors that you're taking into consideration. But with an entrepreneur, it has to be so careful about every hiring decision, because it really costs so much to have a full-time employee. You have to make the right call. Are there a few key things that you're looking for in general, or is it not fair to generalize, key characteristics of people for every position?
I think that you have to, when you think about who you're hiring, you have to get really honest with what work do you want to get done? And what does this position realistically look like? So is this a generalist position? You're hiring someone that you need to be able to manage your social media account, book travel, and, make sure that your QuickBooks are all done. Those are three very different tasks in very different minds. And so I find that entrepreneurs try to find that person that can do, 4 completely different jobs in one person. And it doesn't always happen. And those unicorns are few and far between. I think, for entrepreneurs, depending on where their cycle is in their business, I recommend hiring contractors that are experts in their role. And that way, if you can spend, the money for one full-time employee, what if you hire, and you need those 3 things done, what if you hired 3 experts at an hourly rate on a contract? Then you get a lot more flexibility with your organization. Then you also have people doing what they do best, and you're not going to have to work as much. You're not going to have to follow up. You're not going to have to think about how to do it, because you've hired an expert to do it.
Yeah, exactly. And you don't have to worry about having 3 full-time employees necessarily who, you're concerned about them being, overhead and concerned maybe about them being busy full time. And you can just hire people more on an hourly basis. Yeah. And that actually kind of leads me into my next question, which was about, right now, especially, it's never been easier to work virtually and to hire, somebody from around the world. You've done work globally. Do you, when you're hiring, do you look for people all around the world for, particular positions, or are you trying to place people, if you're working with a US company, are you generally trying to find somebody in the US, or are you really looking globally?
Yeah. So I am open globally when I find the right talent that matches the needs of our customers. And, we created a virtual business when I launched 304 because I had always been a remote worker. Most of my career, I was managing teams remotely. So I didn't really necessarily know how to, I don't even know if I could manage a team that was all in front of my face every day. I just have never done it. I've always had teams all over the country, North America, times globally. And so we designed the organization from day one to be a virtual organization, which obviously helped out a lot as we transitioned in 2020.
Sure.
So and what that did for my organization, now not every organization works that way, but if you can have a virtual organization, what that allows you to do is, again, get the right person, get that expert. You have to look at your business different. You have to look at how you evaluate results different if you've got a virtual organization. But I've worked with a lot of companies over the last couple of years who thought they needed people in the office, and they struggled to find the right people. And maybe the market they were in, the cost of living was so high that they couldn't afford to hire someone. But yet, if they hired a remote person from somewhere else, they could afford to hire them. And so, as you started to think about what do you need, what are your your finances, all those types of things, going remote and asking people to work remotely if they can, there's just so much benefit to it. It's endless.
Yeah, it can be a little overwhelming to figure out where to find the right talent. There's different platforms out there like Upwork and Fiverr, although that's they're more for just like little jobs you have to do, and it's kind of hit or miss. But I think it would be better to work with somebody like you, I think, who can really dial it in and find somebody, use your method of finding not just somebody who can do a job, because you can go on Upwork and find, you type in graphic design, you're going to get 100,000 people who can do a job, but then they might be fine to just knock one project out. Takes a couple weeks or whatever it is, but can you trust them, and can they integrate with your team on an ongoing, consistent basis? I think that's where it gets much more into, you got to get into the weeds of really vetting somebody out. And so I think working with somebody you would make a lot of sense to figure out, who's the best person for my company now, and a year from now and several years from now, and can they grow too, and can you scale up with them?
Yeah, and that's part of the talent strategy process. I talk to especially startups all the time, and they have like these very elaborate business plans, and they're going in and they're pitching for funding, and they're getting millions of dollars in funding, and then they struggle because running a business is about having a great team. And it amazes me that how many, people will walk into a pitch to get funding, and there's no talent strategy of how are you actually going to get this work done. You have a great idea. You may have a great product. It's all mapped out. The processes are fantastic. Your everything is beautiful. You've got this great run rate, but then all of a sudden there's no one to run the business. And then that's where they start to kind of go off the cliff. And it amazes me that people will fund an organization without a talent strategy, and you have to have one.
Yep. Well, I think it's interesting because as entrepreneurs, we're sort of feel like we can do everything ourselves sometimes. And like we're general contractors and we can just pretty much figure everything out. Right. But at a certain point, and that works a little bit in the beginning to a certain point, and you do have to wear a lot of hats. You do have to figure out, work in every aspect, or as many aspects, many parts of your business as you possibly can, and in order to understand and learn it and figure out how to teach other people how to do the things that you eventually won't have time for. But then that's the thing. Eventually you just don't have time to do all these different things. And it's not all these different things. Like you might be amazing at developing a product and coming up with new ideas for products, but you might not really be all that great at marketing, or you might be good at, business to business sales, but you're not that great at, digital marketing and directly to consumers or whatever it is. So yeah, it's so important as soon as you can. Of course, there's this tipping point, or there's this point where you can't afford to hire somebody, and you have to do things yourself. But at some point you really, I think, have to bite the bullet, invest in people to expand your business, whether that's hiring somebody for a few hours a week or hiring a few people full time. So, do you work with smaller companies who are just at that sort of tipping point and trying to figure out how to transition and scale their business, or are you typically working with larger firms?
We work with a variety of firms. Or organizations. Some of our organizations that we help, especially in the startup phase, they're probably at 20 to 30 employees. And when I can get in at that level, oh my gosh, the difference we can make, because that's where you lay the foundation. and you're at a place where you don't have to break it all to rebuild it.
Mm.
And then I have, a large group of clients that are, several thousand employees. And usually we have to go in and break a little bit and
Mm.
create new habits and create new ways of work. And it's a different type of approach. But I love getting my hands on companies that are, anywhere from, 30 to a couple hundred people, because it's when you can do some of your best work, because you can say, this is what I want. And you really start to think about scalability of your team. So if based on your projections that in 5 years from now, you're going to need a chief HR officer, and you're looking at a very young and hungry and super crazy smart, creative marketing person that's already on your team. Well,
Mm-hmm.
don't just think, well, in 5 years, I'll hire a chief marketing officer. What can you do in the next 5 years for this person that's on your team to get them ready to be that person?
Sure.
And oftentimes we just let it go and we hope that they're ready, and hope is never a strategy. Or, we don't invest in them, or we burn them out. But if you can get really focused at that smaller stage and then plan the trajectory of your key people, they're going to be with you long term. They're going to help you get your company where you want it to be. And you're going to have a ton of fun doing it, because people are going to be growing under your leadership. And it gives you purpose and excitement. And it's just a lot of fun.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you're growing your business for the long term, instead of just trying to keep people in and keep pulling people in and have more of that I feel like that generates more of like a revolving door type, environment, where you're not focused on cultivating the talent that you already have.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
much, it's funner and more affordable to build them from the inside than to go and buy them off of someone else. And
Yeah,
sometimes we have to
sure.
do that. Sometimes we have to go outside our organization and find the right person. But so many times the right person has been sitting in front of us for years. We just didn't do anything with them. And so now when we need them to, go to a new level, they're not ready. And we own that as leaders. We own, if our
Yeah.
team is not growing, we own that.
Yeah. So how do you do that? How do you, if you're trying to, you feel like you've got somebody who's got, this untapped talent and they have a lot of room for growth. How do you help them become a better leader, a better version of themselves within the company?
Yeah. So when we work with organizations and we've identified 5 people in the organization that we feel are our future talent and we need to invest in them.
Mm-hmm.
So the process we go through is we give them individual coaching, because
Mm-hmm.
leadership is a mental game as much as it's a skill game.
Mm-hmm.
And so, to keep them sharp and to keep them from burnout, they need an executive coach. Then we put them through group experiences in education. So we have leadership academies that we custom design for. They're like a plug and play type model. And we work with the organization to say, this group of people in 5 years, what skills, what competencies, what knowledge, what do they need to have? And then we put them through a peer learning experience and allow them to learn all those skills that they need. And then also look for additional opportunities that are very specific to that industry. If they're in, taxes versus marketing versus sales, how do they get experiences? And then we have a lot of good conversations and talk to them about their journey. One, make sure they want to go on that journey, because sometimes we assume they do and they don't.
Yeah, sure. It can happen.
And then staying really close. The leaders or the owners of the organization have to stay close to these people. And so, we bring in different tools to wrap our arms around those key players and to ensure that they're ready and that they stay within the organization and that they're ready to take on the responsibility as it's coming in.
Okay, sure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so you're really, you're spending a lot of time with them. You're really trying to dig deep and figure out what motivates them and how they can become better. Yeah, I love that. So Jennifer, through your entrepreneurial journey, from the highs to the lows, what has been the most difficult thing about being an entrepreneur?
Oh, the most difficult thing. I think the most difficult thing in the beginning for me was keeping everyone's opinion out of my head. And so when
Okay.
I decided to leave a very nice corporate job, I mean, who doesn't want to fly around the world? I mean, my corporate job looked fantastic, especially on Instagram. I mean, I traveled the world and saw all kinds of great places. And, when I told people I was going to leave and start my own business, there was a lot of naysayers. So be careful who you share your dreams with, because sometimes they can get in your head. So I think that's one of the most difficult things, is staying true to what you want to do and what you believe in. Because the world will try to influence you.
Sure. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And you need some feedback. You need to talk to people at some point about what you're doing. But it is interesting because you want to trust, you trust the people around you, right? But like, they don't necessarily always understand the entrepreneurial journey and what is all involved with that, and maybe the potential involved with that. I think the thing that excites me the most about owning a business and being an entrepreneur is the potential. That's what gets me excited every day. And if I was waking up every day knowing that, like, okay, I can only make this much money and I can only sort of do this much every day, and I'm not necessarily going to grow. I don't have the opportunity to grow by leaps and bounds, both personally and in my business and financially. It just would not be as exciting. But it's also not as safe, So there's people who love you, who want to keep you safe, and so sometimes that can be difficult to say, hey, I hear what you're saying, but I got to do this. This is, you got to trust yourself too. I think Sarah Blakely, who created Spanx, I remember her saying something about, she didn't tell, when she came up with the idea for Spanx, she didn't tell anybody for a year. So she was just, she was missing all these events, family and friends, and just to work on, she would tell people she had an idea she was working on, that's it, but didn't tell anybody, and took that year to get a little traction. So that after that year, it didn't sound so crazy anymore. It was like, hey, this is what I've been working on. And I've actually, it's not a dumb idea. So I think that's kind of an interesting approach sometimes, although, you don't want to leave everybody completely in the dark,
Yeah. It's all a balance.
Freaking out.
Yeah, it's all a balance. I was talking to a client just this last week, and she's branching off and wants to do a new vertical within her business. And she was like, I had this idea, and she'd done a lot of work on it. And I had talked to so-and-so, and they just kept telling me it was going to be a lot of work. And I just don't know. And I'm like, is it a lot of work for you or a lot of work for them? And she was like, I don't see it as work. And I'm like, that's because you were meant to do it. They were not meant to do it.
Right.
And that's why it looks like work to them.
Sure.
And, and I think that's why, especially as entrepreneurs, you have to have a coach. My first 2 years, I had an incredible coach that I still talk to today, but I talk to him at least once a week. And it's that safe space to talk to someone and to work through ideas and to think about what you want to do. But yeah, it makes such a difference. But yeah, it was funny when she was like, everyone just keeps telling me it's work. And I'm like, what do you think? And she's like, it sounds fun to me. Like, then stop listening to everyone else.
Yeah, exactly.
Go have fun.
Yeah. Go do it, get it, get it done. But, or find people, who also don't feel like it's work, who also view it as fun, and everybody's having fun. So yeah, I love that. Well, Jennifer, it's been great talking to you. I just have one more question as we wrap up the episode. Is there one piece of advice that you could give to our audience that might help them on their entrepreneurial journey, either that might help them if they're looking to hire somebody or just in general?
I think in general, where I see entrepreneurs succeed, and one of the difference makers I see out there are people who make decisions. So many people will sit around with ideas and ideate for days, years, decades, and never pull the trigger. You've got to make decisions. You got to get really comfortable and make decisions all day, every day, right or wrong. Just be out there making decisions, because when you sit and just wallow in the choices, you're making the decision to do nothing. And I think that's one of the biggest things I see from failure to success is people who are just making decisions and getting out there and moving forward.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And when you're making decisions, you're moving the needle in some way, and you hope it's forward. Sometimes it's not. When every decision doesn't necessarily translate to, to a big increase in the bottom line, which is what we're all kind of looking for, at least partially. But yeah, I totally agree. Whenever I feel like things are getting pushed off and decisions I hate not checking things off my list, right? So I want to make a decision on something and move on. And you have to be as educated as you can, and try and, use experiences to guide those decisions. But I totally agree. Just, make decisions, move on, learn from them, and then continue to make new decisions. Otherwise, you're just not really going anywhere.
No, you're just circling the drain when you're not making decisions.
Yep. I love that. Well, guys, thank you so much for listening to That Entrepreneur Life. To learn more about what Jennifer is working on, check out 304coaching.com. If you like what you heard today, make sure to subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or any other major podcast directory. You can also find us on all the socials and on our website at thatentrepreneurlife.com.
Thanks for listening to That Entrepreneur Life podcast. Be sure to visit thatentrepreneurlife.com to join the conversation, access our show notes, and discover our fantastic bonus content. Don't forget to join us next week for another episode as we continue to add value. Until next time.